Hello class, welcome to Pre-Algebra Lesson 4.3, which is all about representing and using the percent equation. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to represent and solve percent problems using equations. So before we jump into the equation part, I want to review a skill that you guys have learned in the past, maybe briefly. So some of you might remember, some of you might think that this looks brand new, and that's just fine. Okay, so the very first skill that we're going to practice before we get into the percent equation is converting each decimal to its percent equivalent. Okay, so a common question that I will have students ask is, how do I know if it's a percent or a decimal? And honestly, it all comes down to, is there a percent sign? If there is no percent sign, then you are going to assume that this is a decimal and it needs to be converted to a percent. Okay? And the way that we convert a decimal to a percent is you are going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. And sometimes that's going to mean that you're moving it and there's nothing behind it, so you might have to add a 0. Okay? I don't think I actually included one that looks like that, but just so you know. Alright, so here's my decimal. I need to move it 2 places to the right, so I'm going to move it 1, 2. My new decimal is after the 5, so I would have 25%, because I don't need to write that 0, right? That 0 doesn't need to go in front of the 25. Okay, now I have 0.08. I move it 1, 2. So my decimal now comes after the 8. I don't have to write zeros in front of it, so that represents 8%. Okay, I'm going to move it 1, 2. So now I see that the decimal comes right before the 3, so I would have 0.3%, and I like to put a 0 there just to draw attention to the decimal point. Okay, that's kind of a good practice to get into. Okay, now I'm going to move it 1, 2 again, and now my decimal is going to be after that 7, so I have 157%. So that's how you're going to convert from a decimal to a percent equivalent. All right, so why don't you go ahead and try this one on your own. Good luck. All right, hopefully you move that decimal 2 places to the right and determine it's 73%. Okay, now let's try doing that same idea, but this time we're going to take a percent and change it to a decimal. So when you're going from a percent to a decimal, you're going to move the decimal the other direction. So, but it's always 2 places, okay? So move decimal 2 places to the left. Okay, so right now I don't see a decimal with my 42. That's because a decimal place has invisibility powers if there's nothing that follows the decimal. So that means my decimal is going to be right after the last number listed. So I'm going to move it 2 places. That means that my decimal now needs to be in front of my 42, and I'm going to put a 0 in front of that decimal, so that way I know that there's a decimal in front of the 42. Okay, and this is a common mistake I'll see students make. Sometimes I'll see students write that and then they go like this because they know that they're working with percents, but they forget that they've changed it to a decimal. So once it changes to a decimal, it no longer has the percent sign, and that's really important because if you write that percent sign, sometimes your brain will end up moving the decimal again in the wrong direction, and then you end up with incorrect answers. Okay, so make sure when you move that decimal to the left, you get rid of that percent sign. Okay, so right now 9%, my decimal is after the 9. I need to move it 1, 2. Notice that I have this gap here. I need to fill that with a 0. So I have 0.09 as my decimal, and I'm going to put a 0 in front of that decimal just to help draw my eyes to that decimal place. Okay, right now my decimal for 185%, it's after the 5. I need to move it 1, 2 spaces, so now my decimal is going to be in between the 1 and the 8. So 185% is the same as 1.85 as a decimal. 0.01%, I need to still move it to the left. Sometimes students get confused. They see a decimal and they're like, oh, I'm going to move it to the right, and it is 1. No. Nope. If you have a percent sign, it means that to change it to a decimal, it has to go to the left. So it means in this case that we're going to have even more zeros, right? We're going to have 0.0001, and again, I personally put that 0 in front of the decimal to make it easier for my eyes to find that decimal point. All right. So biggest takeaways when you're changing from percent to decimal, move it to the left and get rid of the percent sign. Okay. And then just because I can't stop seeing this, to me, this looks like the start of like a little face, right? Like eyes, and then it's just missing like a little mouth. I just couldn't unsee that, so I had to share it with you guys. All right, now I want you to take a moment to try converting this percent to its decimal equivalent. Good luck. All right, for this problem, hopefully you ended up with 0.002, and you did not say percent. You just left it as a number. If you did, great. If you didn't, please be sure to ask questions if you're unsure how you got your answer. All right, now we get to finally take a look at the percent equation. And before I do that, I'm actually going to introduce that percent equation on this page, okay? So if we think about what we've been doing, right? We've been doing the whole, and we've been doing part over whole, and then we have our percent, right, over 100. So for the equation, we're going to write this slightly different, okay? I want to change just a couple of things. I am going to say part over whole, and then, oops, part over whole equals my percent. Okay, I'm just going to change that second fraction to say percent. Okay, now if we think about this, we've been doing a lot of like cross multiplying, right? So every time we've cross multiplied, we've taken the whole, or like the bottom number, and multiplied it to the other side, right? So for our percent equation, what it looks like is we say the part is all that's left, okay? So we have part, and then we have equals, and then we have whole, times our percent. Okay, so that's how you can make a connection between like what we've been doing and what we're about to do. Okay, so our percent equation is part equals whole times percent. All right, and I know that this is my percent equation because there is an equal sign, okay? This right over here, that was our proportion. We had a fraction equals a fraction, right? And then all I did was I changed it into what's called the percent equation. Okay, now let's solve this first problem. Well, I guess it's example 3, but let's solve it. We have in science class, students compared their vertical reach, so how high they can reach, and their height, so top of their head, to see if they are proportional. Maria is 60 inches tall and can reach 75 inches high. What percent of her total vertical reach is her height? Okay, so the part here would be just her regular height, right? So I would say 60 equals, and then the whole, what is her entire reach? Her entire reach is 75 inches. And then I still need to figure out like what percent is that. Okay, so that's how I would set up my equation. And if I were to kind of simplify it a little bit, sometimes you will see where we get rid of the multiplication sign and we just put that variable right next to the number, and that's perfectly fine. And that's actually what you're going to see more and more as you continue with math. All right, now, in order to solve this, strangely enough, we actually have to go back to kind of that proportion idea where I have to move this 75 to the other side so that way I can know exactly what my percent equals. So the way I do that is I divide. Okay, we haven't learned how to solve equations quite yet, but this is something called a one-step equation, and right now we want to get p, the percent, all by itself, and it's being multiplied with 75. The way that you solve a one-step equation is you do the opposite operation. So right now it's multiplying. The opposite operation is division. And when I divide, it moves it over to the other side of the equal sign. Okay? So you can look forward to that later this year. We have 60 divided by 75, and if I type that into a calculator, I get 0.8 equals p. Now, I'm looking for a percent, and I have a decimal. So in order to convert this 0.8 to a percentage, I need to move that decimal 2 places to the right. So that means that my answer would be 80%. All right, so that means that Maria's height is 80% of her total vertical reach. Okay? Now, I want you to take a moment and solve a problem very similar. Okay? We have an elephant weighs 15,000 pounds on Earth and only 2,500 pounds on the moon. Assuming the weights are proportional, what percent of its weight on Earth is its weight on the moon? Okay, so again, we're looking for the percent equation. I want you to practice that. So we have part equals whole times percent. All right, so go ahead, use that percent equation to set it up and to solve. Good luck. All right, for this problem, hopefully you set it up like I did, where you have part is the 2,500, the weight on the moon, equals 15,000 p. And then to get the percent all by itself, you divide it by divide it by 15,000, not 150,000. So 2,500 divided by 15,000 is 0.167, about, I'm rounding. But then if I were to move that decimal 2 places, I would get 16.7, and I'm just going to round to the nearest percent. So 16.7 rounds up to 17, my goodness, percent. Speaking is so difficult at the moment. 17%. All right, now let's practice finding the part. We have many states have a meal tax that is proportional to the total spent on food and beverages. In one state, the meal tax is 8.44%. How much tax will the customer pay if the food and beverages beverages total $54? Okay, so now we're looking for just the tax, which represents the part. Okay, so I'm going to say I'm going to use just X for part, equals the whole bill is $54 times, and then my percent, 8.44% as a decimal would be 0.0844. Okay, right? Because I have to move it 2 spaces. So 54 times 0.0844, and I would have X equals When I multiply those two things together, I get 4.5576. And since we were talking about money here, right, I would round to the nearest hundredth, meaning two decimal places. So that 7 is going to round my 5 up to a 6. So the amount spent in tax is $4.56. All right, so that would be my final answer for this problem. However, something you should know is in your assignment or on your assignment, what you're going to do is sometimes it'll ask for the tax and sometimes it'll ask for what is the total including tax. So if it's asking for the total including tax, all you would have to do is take that 456 and add it on to the original, and you would say that their total is $58.56. Okay, so pay close attention to what your assignment is asking you to find. All right, now we have finding the whole. Jane earns a 5.5% commission on the selling price of each home she sells. She earned $9,020 in commission on the sale of a home. What is the selling price of the home? Okay, so the part, we know she earned $9,020 based on whatever the entire price of the home is. And we know that 5.5% commission, we need to convert that to a decimal, so 0.055. So we'd have 0.055. All right, and I'm going to rearrange this just a little bit. So 9,020 equals 0.055W. And the reason I do that is it's a good habit to get into when you put, wow, seriously, words are so difficult. They're really not. I'm just making them difficult. It is best practice to put the variable after the number that it's being multiplied with. Think of it almost like math grammar rules, okay? Do I know what you mean if you write this? Yes, but to be even clearer, you should write it like this, second option. Yay, math grammar. Okay, now, same thing that we've been doing. Now I would divide, right? I would take my part and I would divide it by my percent, and that would give me the whole cost. And if I were to do this, I would end up with $164,000. So that was the entire price of the home that Jane sold. Okay, so she earned commission, which means she just gets, if you don't know what commission is, it means that people that work on commission, they earn a portion of the profit. Okay, so the $164,000 house, she got $9,020 for selling a house worth that much. So some common careers that work on commission include cars salesmen and realtors, so people that sell homes. I'd say those are two of the most popular that you would be familiar with as middle schoolers. Okay, now I want you to try this problem on your own. We have to make a profit. A clothing store sells board shorts at 115% of the amount they paid for them. How much did the store pay for the board shorts shown? Okay, so here are the shorts. They're $28, and the store sells them at 115% of the original price. Okay, so you want to figure out what was the original price. Good luck. Okay, for this problem, hopefully you figured out that the original price that the store purchased these shorts for was $24.35, and then they are selling them for $28. So that's how stores make money, is they buy it at one cost and sell at a higher cost. Okay, if you did not end up with that answer, please check your work and compare it to what I just did and have on the screen. If you still have questions, please ask for help, whether it's me or a friend. I am very happy to help you, okay? Now, the last page is just the key concept. So it's showing the relationship between proportions and the proportion way of solving, and then the percent equation way of solving. So if you have questions about that or anything else from the video, please be sure to reach out for some help. I am happy to help you. Have a great day.